You know, son, you're not a kid anymore.
Oh, no, I go to
shows.
Dad, I already know all this stuff.
Well, they don't teach you about everything
At shows.
Okay, Mr. Smarty Pants? So just listen. When boys and girls get a little older, they start getting
interested in punk and hardcore subgenres. Starter kit.
All right, we're doing a starter kit, and Ben is gonna describe to us. Nail it down, Ben. What starter kit are you giving us?
I'm going to do the early days of the DC scene. So roughly from the beginning of the Bad Brains to the breakup of Minor Threat. So 78, 79, all the way to the end of 83. I think that's like a good period. You know, that's a good, things changed a lot in DC after, you know, Minor Threat. You have the Revolution Summer thing happening in 85. So that could be its own thing. So I'm just talking about these early days.
Early days of DC hardcore. Hit it, Ben.
Or DC, you know, 1.5, I would say pre-hardcore, before it was solidified. So, you know, Bad Brains recorded this demo in 78 and it's really slow. But by the time they record the next demo in 79, the tempos are faster, still not to where they're going to be. And they record an entire album's worth of material at Don Zientara's house with HR standing in the backyard. And, you know, neighborhood kids are seeing this guy yelling into a microphone. They don't hear the music because the music's happening inside. You know, he's wearing headphones. And they're just like, who is this lunatic? And so that gets released many, many, many years later. Like I want to say 95 or 96 as Black Dots on Caroline Records, but this is really the Bad Brains 1979 demo, and it's incredible. And there's Rollins and Ian MacKaye love talking about like what would have happened if that came out in 1979 as a full album, like a proper album, because it's so well recorded. It does not sound like a demo. It sounds like a legit great album, and it was all recorded live, which is just insane because it's so good. So I'd say start with that, and the two standout tracks I'm going to say are Band in DC and Pay to Come. I think those are songs that they're really known for. And then moving on from that, we're going into 1980 with the Discord #1, the Teen Idol's Minor Disturbance EP. And so this is Ian MacKaye on bass before he's a singer, Jeff Nelson, later of Minor Threat, on drums, and then you have Nathan on vocals, who then ends up in DC Youth Brigade after that. And so this record is great. It kind of hints at things to come for at least three of the members. I think their guitarist kind of disappeared after this. The Teen Idols, the song Teen Idols and the song Sneakers would be the standout tracks on this. And it's famous for the record cover because you have someone making fists with their arm in an X with X's on their hands. And this is kind of before that became synonymous with straight edges of movement or anything like that. And if you want to know why and how that the whole X thing happened, you can read my article, of course. Got to plug that. But it's a really fun listen. It's like there's a fun kind of adolescent, all the stuff was written while they were still in high school, vibe to it that sort of disappears with my next pick, which is Minor Threat. And if you're listening to this podcast, you know who Minor Threat is, and you already own at least you own the CD with all the songs. But how could I not put them on the list? That would be ridiculous. So Minor Threat complete discography. Fuck it. I asked if I had permission to, use a complete discography as an album instead of having to choose. You know, it's like Sophie's Choice, trying to choose which Minor Threat is the most representative one.
Yeah, and Ben, just to explain that, like this is a starter kit, right, for people that want to understand a subgenre. So basically, you know, you can use anything that's accessible to the people, right? Like that's all.
And that thing has been a starter kit for most people getting into punk and hardcore from early 90s on.
Yeah, it's mostly the starter kit for the whole thing for everyone whenever you enter.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say not only is this the early DC era starter kit choice, but if I was to make a starter kit for all of punk and hardcore, this would be on it as well. Yes, of course. So I'd say I'm going to pick the song Seeing Red and the song Think Again. So you get a taste of that 81 era with Seeing Red, which is on their first self-titled 7-inch. And then that 83 era from Out of Step, we have Think Again. And you can see just in those two songs, musical progression from simple and hard and fast to, the tempos kind of moving around and a little bit more musical and a little bit more melodic. And the interesting thing about Seeing Red is the music was written by Jeff Nelson, the drummer, and it's the only Minor Threat song that he wrote, I believe. And I thought for the longest time he wrote the lyrics too, but nope, Ian MacKaye wrote those lyrics. So my fourth choice would be the greatest split record ever recorded, the Faith Void split LP, also on Discord, which came out in 1982. And obviously I'm going to have to pick one song from each side. So I'm picking, in honor of Anthony Papalardo and the Sped Up in My Eyes LP, I'm picking What's Wrong With Me by Faith, which was covered by In My Eyes. And then for Void, I'm picking My Rules, which is a different version of this appears on the Flex Your Head comp. And I mean, if you could say just get the Flex Your Head comp and you'd hear what all these bands, Bad Brains excluded, sound like. But let's pick these individual records instead of just saying buy the Flex Your Head comp. But Void is fucking wild. I think Faith is kind of more in was crafted in the vision of Minor Threat. It's kind of what's Ian's younger brother, Alec, is the singer, who, by the way, is the guy with the X's on the hands on the Teen Idols record and the bald head looking down on the Minor Threat record. So he's like the model, literally the model for DC of this era. And so Faith is a little bit more traditional, straightforward hardcore. Void is completely singular. They don't sound like anyone else. And this song I first heard on the Rodney on the Rock show when Sonic Youth were guest hosting because Rodney was out of town or something. And they played this song and I'm like, this is so fucking good. I can't believe how good this is. And for my last choice, I'm going Scream I'm going to go their first album, which came out in 83. I think it might've been recorded in 82, came out in 83 on Discord. And it's called Still Screaming. And Scream is famous for being a band that Dave Grohl played drums in, but this is pre-Dave Grohl era. Kent Stax on drums, who's also an amazing drummer. And Came Without Warning is the first song on that. And Solidarity is a little bit more sing-songy, but also hyper fast. And I think of Scream as sort of a combination of The Damned and Minor Threat, and almost like probably coincidentally sounds similar to 7 Seconds, but the musicianship is so top notch. They seem more like adults who like really knew how to play their instruments than a lot of other bands in that scene. So you can't go wrong with any of these. I think that's it.
Well, right on. Daniel, you are an aficionado of this early DC sound. How do you feel Ben's starter kit is for someone that has never been exposed to this genre?
Oh, it's pretty perfect. Like, I mean, I like that he did it in a little bit of a chronological manner, so but you're also being exposed to the basically at least four of them, the kind of Mount Rushmore-y bands when you think of the very early DC. I was thinking maybe SOA would have been on there, but I can also see why they're not with the other choices,
Yeah, originally I was going to have Government Issue, a song off of their Boycott Stab record, but I couldn't. I I took them off and I put Teen Idols on because I think Government Issue gets very interesting a little bit later on. Like at this point, they're a fun, fast hardcore band. But then they start going into interesting directions more in the mid to late 80s.
Yeah,
but also a great band.
What's great is that it's the starter kit, right? So this is like, check these out, which it also will provide a level of interest where it's like, this band came before this all important, encompassing genius band. Do you know what I mean? It's like, here's the fun groundswell before this insane, like, scorched earth, minor threat, atom bomb, you know?
Yeah, you have to have it because of who it is and when it is. But also, like, you know, the point of this starter kits is you're gonna get into this stuff if you aren't already, and there is so much more for you to figure out on your own, right? Like, none of the areas or the genres we're doing starter kits on is like, well, there was 5 good releases from this ever. This is all you need. No, it's a starter kit, you know? Anthony Papalardo, how did you feel about this one?
I mean, the starter kit's perfect. The only thing I would add is sort of like a couple layers. There's kind of bands that are adjacent that are not sort of part of like the capital D, capital C hardcore scene, you know, like we're talking United Mutation or sort of these antagonistic bands, which I think, you know, No Trend, like Numero Group put out that box set. I'm not the biggest fan, but I do think it is super interesting that you have bands that are reacting to like how sort of, you know, it's kind of like if you look at Youth of Today or whatever, right? Like someone comes up with the code of something and then someone has to press against it. I think No Trend is pretty interesting at the same time to be like tapping into PIL or Flipper or whatever. And so I think like it's almost like an alternative starter kit to look at like the bands that were pushing against that. I'd add Black Market Baby, that I think Doctor Strange put out that like compilation of like all their early stuff. I think that's pretty interesting stuff. It's not essential. No slight to Black Market Baby, but I think that's interesting. And then also the only thing I'd add is that I have such reverence for Henry Rollins. When he had the opportunity he's kind of like the OG reissue person. You know, when he started that label Infinite Zero, which I believe was with Rick Rubin, he was putting things in print that weren't in print, so that like he put all the Gang of Four records, the first 2 Gang of Four records in print, and Devo records that weren't in print. I thought that was really cool. And then later he did and pardon me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe it was the 30 Seconds Over DC comp. So that's like the genre, sort of like the people before what we're talking about. So if you want to dig back a little more, and that was on initially issued on Limp Records, which was it the Filler 7-inch was a split release with Limp Records, right?
Yeah, like Skip Groff.
Skip Groff, right?
Yeah.
So that one that has like the Slicky Boys and like some interesting stuff. So if you want to dig back, definitely not a starter kit, but if you're like, what's before the starter kit, that record's pretty interesting. And Rollins had, he didn't do it on Infinite Zero. He did it on like his other imprint, but I think that's cool that I really appreciate that he identified things that were important to him that weren't existing and keeping them in print. So that stuff exists out there. But yeah, I just think, I think that's such, I mean, that scene's going to be defined by straight edge in the sense of like, that's the most important thing that happened, but also there's people pushing against it. And I think that tension is so important. And then what happens just a couple years after that is so important. So, you know, like it's kind of like what Ben said, like you could just get Flex Your Head and you have your introduction to the family tree, and that's amazing too. Like they're pretty much everything splines off that. So yeah, no, I think it's perfect.
I love it. The early DC punk and hardcore starter kit. Killer job, Ben. And we'll do another one soon. And,